Hey gang, it's KR, King of D&D Homebrew, talking today about how to make your descriptions land with your players in such a way that you're giving them the information they need, to navigate their way through your world, but you're also imbuing it with an emotion, an enthusiasm, and kind of a mood that matches the world that you're creating for them. And you're using, tools like visual aids, pictures and whatnot, whether online or in person, things like maps. You're thinking about taking your focus here and going down here, narrowing it. And it's interesting, this kind of came up to me. I was playing online with a group run by Joe from the Hindsightless podcast. You should check out his podcast. It's really good. And as Joe was going about this, he did his descriptors. We were playing online. It was a Zoom game, no VTT, using real dice at home. We just had our pictures up. And then Joe would put pictures back of the setting that he had, the different things, just visual aids, just photographs in the background that would be on as he was describing this. And it was very effective because Joe said to us, look, this is just a representation. This is not from a module. This is not, taking this off the page of something. This is something I just found, and it's supposed to evoke this. And so what this does when you have a picture that you say to the players, this isn't really what it is. Well, they look. So for instance, there was this cabin on this hill in this thing Joe was running, and there was a cemetery all around the cabin. And he said, now this is just a representation. So we're like asking questions because we're looking at the picture, but we have thoughts in our head. Is there a path through these gravestones, right? What does the ground look like? Are there areas sunken in front of each grave? Like, something was buried there. We get to the cabin and the picture stimulates, has a door and windows, but what does it really have, right? And you ask those questions, front door, back door, all that kind of stuff. And the picture just gives you some guideposts, some signifiers there to say, these are the things you should ask about. What's the condition of the cabin? What are the woods like? And then Joe's descriptions of that matched the mood of the piece, which was horror. So this was done in Beyond the Wall. It's an OSR system. Very interesting. It's kind of a rules light system. It's really great for these kind of short, mini adventure kind of things. And the theme here was a horror theme. Lots of scary stuff. I started off with the graves, but there's cults and, all dead now or whatever. And you're going in, you're trying to get this item for this guy. And Joe's descriptions matched that sort of mood, that sort of temper, which it was very effective. And, back to the pictures, you think, okay, online you're going to have them. Well, I've used them in real life. I have all this stuff on my computer that I'm running. So I'll put a JPEG or something on there and show it to the players and say, this is what this looks like, generally speaking. It's not exact, right? I also have a player, she wants me to send those to her. She prints them off and then puts the names. She's got all the lead characters in my world, all named. She knows exactly who they are. She's just into that, right? Always good to have a player like that. And in terms of visual aids with maps, I always start off with kind of a general map of the known world. This is what the average person in this world, they know these settlements, they know these large geographic entities, this mountain range here, or a river that runs there. Then as the players go through the world, they can make their own map if they'd like, or you can also have them get maps. When they receive a map, maybe some local person gives them a more detailed map of the area. They're out to help that person or whatever. Maybe they get a hold of a map of some keep or some temple. And don't underestimate this. When the players think they have an edge, we have the layout of this temple. We know how to attack this. Even if the odds are not good, the tendency among, human beings is if I think I have an edge, I'm going to make a gamble more so than if I don't. And the players are going to have fun with that because they get to plan so much better with a map, with a visual aid of where they are going. Just as when Joe was showing us those pictures that correlated to the stuff we were seeing, it just stimulated us to ask questions, and it also helped us imagine ourselves there. So another really important part of descriptions is the enthusiasm or, intensity of your manner of delivering them. And here with this, the good and the bad are on either spectrum of this, right? If you are just over dramatic, over enthusiastic, it doesn't match either the theme of your world or the table, it starts to get bizarre, and I have seen people yell and scream, or I have seen people who get up and do all sorts of crazy things. And again, some of that is very infectious. Some of that gets you, on the edge of your seat. You've got to maintain it. The worst, you sort of would rather have someone who's overdramatic than someone who is totally boring and dull. Like when somebody is reading those giant block text from some adventure path or module, and they're just looking, and your eyes just start to glaze over. You're like, I can't listen to this. You enter a room, there's a big lizard in the corner, roll initiative. That's the dragon battle, right, that we're all waiting for. And of course, sometimes that text to the writers, they might say, well, I made it very exciting and whatever. If you don't read it well, okay, I get that. That's the problem with just reading things off anyway. Make it into your own words. This is a module advice when your descriptors take what they've got, but put it in your own words. Because it's coming from you, it's not from some text, because you want that enthusiasm. The thing is, if you don't care about your world, neither will the players. Right. Now, we all know the players don't care as much about our world as we do, but that's another topic, right? But in this case, if you're just sitting there going, and then you go down in the river and you look, what do you do? They're just bored. They want to feel like there's impending something coming, right? There's an expectancy. There's, every description means something to the players. They're in this potentially dangerous place, even a regular world, much less some forgotten temple that they're going into, and that you want your descriptions to match that level of sort of expectant fear. And this is the thing, when Joe was doing this, he was enthusiastic. He was more on the enthusiastic side, but he also knew when to calm it down, when to talk in an ordinary voice, just, sort of out of game discussion with the players as to what's happening, and then go back into his descriptive mode. The main thing that he wasn't was boring. So in this world, he had like some really creepy stuff. A pipe organ made all out of bones. The leg bones were the big pipes and the finger bones were the keys. And he did it in a very creepy, because this setup was a horror setup. So there's a lot of dread, it's sort of infused with this, a creeping doom feeling. There was also these bowls that had sort of a mixture of blood and effluence or something, and floating around in them were teeth, right? And this is one of these touches where you're like, oh my God, that would be really not just gross, but sort of, inducing of what was going on in this room? What secrets does this place have that I don't want to know? And you want to bring that intensity and that emotion to any kind of world you run, the typical medieval high fantasy, heroic style. The players want to feel like when they're out there that these descriptions lead to some expected moment, right? So if they're traveling through the great forest, the most ancient forest of your world, what does it sound like? What does it smell like? Would it be very silent like the Fangorn forest of Lord of the Rings? Such that when you go inside, maybe there's an occasional stick falling or something, but even that is sort of, exaggerated in its importance because of this overall oppressive silence. And then as the players move through, they begin to detect that under this silence there is a murmur. There are voices, many such voices, and when you listen to them, you realize these are not the voices of humanoids per se. This is perhaps the trees themselves, these ancient entities, older than anything in the known world, whispering about tales of the things they've seen in this ancient forest. And when they strain to hear that voice, what exactly is it saying? Roll initiative. And the other thing about having controlled emotion, right, when you vary that emotion such that there are things that clearly have more import, it tells the players things about your world. So if you have a great city, the greatest city of your continent, everyone on that continent is going to have some opinion about it. And the descriptions of that would reflect, this is the great city, this is the center of the empire, this is what we all either totally respect or totally despise, right? And even if you're out in the remotest village of your world, someone that will never travel anywhere, they'll never see the great city or visit it, when you bring it up, they'll have an opinion on it. They'll have known about it their whole life. They'll have heard. Perhaps they've had travelers that have come through here. Perhaps not. Perhaps it's this mythic place where, there's just fruit falling off the trees and everyone is rich or something else. But that's going to be something that your NPCs are going to feel emotion to it. So their descriptions will be imbued with that as opposed to, there's a rock out there blocking the road. Don't know where it came from. And this kind of emotional control and focus is great for, geographical places of interest in your world. So the greatest falls of the entire continent. As the players approach, they're going to hear the thundering of the water roaring over this great, crack in the earth, this rift valley kind of thing. They're going to hear this from a long ways away, and then as they get closer, there's kind of a general mist in the airs, and the plants are slick with this, and the ground becomes difficult terrain, and then this pounding of this water gets louder and louder, and they break through the foliage, and they just see this incredible tons and tons of water going over into this, this deep escarpment with mist and spray, and they can barely hear each other talk or can't at all, right? And that tells them this is a very significant place. This is, intense. It's obviously a spiritual significance to the locals, or just, the awe itself of nature at this scale. And as always, it's controlled emotion. I talked about the horror thing. We were in this horror thing with Joe online, and he played it up to a certain extent, but he didn't do it to the level. If you're too enthusiastic, it doesn't work, partly because the horror is in itself a little bit campy, right? A little bit, by its very nature, kind of over the edge, sort of the H.P. Lovecraft never met an adjective he didn't like, right? It has that element anyway. So if you go over the top, now again, you may want to do this, and I see these things online sometimes, playing the sort of investigation games where they're, in these outfits and these voices and all that, and that's most of the game, as opposed to some true mystery puzzle that you've got to figure out. I mean, they sort of do it, but all the way along the way, they're acting. It's the performance becomes part of it. That may be what your game is. But if it's not, that can get in the way. You're having so much fun doing your elaborate descriptions and everything. The players are just waiting to get to the action. The other thing is, if you're going to play that kind of game, remember, emotions are huge. They're operatic. Whether it's operatic in despair and longing, whether it's operatic in the desire for revenge, or even operatic in lassitude, in, the ancient vampire who has seen it all. He drifts through the halls of his ruined mansion. Nothing interests him, of course, until a new victim appears. So whatever emotional level and style you are using, in all your descriptions, just like with visual aids and things, I always start out big, a panoramic view, the widescreen view, and then I focus in on those areas that are going to be the greatest interest to the players. Just like when you look at a map and you just see, okay, there's the continent, there's the major cities, there's the river that cuts through it, and now here's the city where we're going, here's the route, what does it look like? Then we maybe a few pages over, there's a detailed map of the state or the city or whatever. You do this when you're describing things for your players in a D&D setting. So your descriptions begin with a general statement of the whole scene, in toto, as the ancients used to say. So if the players are going through a dense forest, suddenly they come to a clearing. They want to see, okay, how wide, what are the dimensions of this clearing? And suddenly up there, I can see the sky now. When I was in the foliage of the trees, it was in this kind of perpetual twilight, right? And then that description of the ground, what's the ground like? Are there geographic things? Is there, a creek that flows through? Are there strange, like, mounds that are unnaturally built? Or perhaps, if there's a creek, maybe a beaver dam or something like that. But give them those general geographic details, and then you're focusing in on what's important. Is there now, evidence of humanoids, like a crude statue just made out of sticks or something, or a very sophisticated obelisk that stands there? Again, the entrance to some tomb or something. And what you're going to do is narrow this closer and closer to the real point of interest, if there is any sort of structure here, right? And if that's the case, now you're going to give a lot of details. Even if the players are still saying, we're standing on the outside of this clearing, we don't want to go in there quite yet. Give them what would be reasonable for them to see. Obviously, they have to go up close to see, like, is there that door handle? Does it turn to touch it? Or they have to look, can you see through the windows? You got to go up to the windows, right? But you give them a general sense. What's the condition of this structure? Is there smoke coming out of the chimney? Does it look in good repair? Is it clear there's a path or a trail that's going through somewhere where because if someone is going to be walking every day or so to the front door, there's going to be evidence of that. There's going to be a trail. And then the players get closer and closer, and your descriptions become, and you start asking them too, now as they're interacting, what are you doing? What are you doing, right? And each thing they ask about, you give them more detail. They're in theory closer, but they're focused in on this. And again, if the house is made, that says something about this place, right? And that may fit in right into like the world I was running with Joe there. That would kind of fit into that kind of world, right? But it's definitely going to impart that, and you might not see that from a distance. You might just see this kind of white, bleached, maybe stucco or something, and then you get closer and realize those are skulls, right? that detail, and that is going to have emotional intensity in and of itself. And you can certainly play it up in your descriptor, but you don't have to do very much. And that's what I saw when running in this little one shot the other day with Joe, where he did those kind of things. He had that enthusiasm, but not too much. He had the skill set of having some adjectives to use to describe this in a way that made that the horror and unease and dread come through. And he also had the visual aids on, because we are all staring at a screen. And so you'd see these, whether it was the house itself or we had a map of the inside of the house so we could look around and decide to go to room A, B, or C, or all that kind of stuff. But it all worked together such that the descriptions matched the action and gave us as players the information we needed and the emotion that is required to have fun. So hopefully that's helpful to you. If you have any stories about those kind of descriptions, that kind of, or your experiences with different GMs and their descriptive styles, I'd love to hear it. And of course, if you want to subscribe to my channel, please do. But most importantly, keep playing an RPG game or many games, whatever you choose. Tell somebody else about them.